sponsor an event, we are absolutely open to that. We are also absolutely open to speakers. So if you know someone that is great in front of people, is smart, knows some stuff, send them our way. Email address, uxpamnboard@gmail.com. Send them our way. We're happy to have conversations. Speaking of sponsors, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Horizontal. There's a lot of stuff. I'm not going to read this to you. And Ham Interactive.
Anything else?
And now the thing that you actually came here for, which is Kat.
No, but then I heard you say you had to be like smart and a great speaker, and I'm like, oh, maybe.
I was talking about you.
Oh,
Yeah, that was my intro to you.
I was looking at my colleagues, seeing if any of them wanted to. Good. Hang on, I gotta do two things at once. Okay. Hopefully the sound is okay online. If it's not, put it in the chat and we'll try and fix it. Try and share the right thing at the right time. Share this guy, this one. Great, good. Does it sound okay as far as we know online? Does it sound okay in here? Can everyone hear me? Good. Does anybody back there wish they had a seat? Because there are 4 or 5 that I can see. Is everyone good where they are? Okay. That's right. It's not church. The first row is not going to get wet. Nothing. There's no glitter bombs. There's nothing exciting happening. Good. Thanks everybody for coming out. Oh, it's not February 18th, is it? That's okay. We're human. Good. Thanks everybody for coming out. I'm super excited to talk a little bit tonight about some experience that I have had and we have had here at Fathom, thinking about medical devices and how to make them safe, usable, and inclusive through iterative user testing. I'm assuming that's something you're all on board with, but I'm going to talk about it and we'll see. Maybe you'll be thinking about it differently than me. Quick intro to me. My name is Kat Jane. I'm a principal consultant here at Fathom. That's like life size. This is airbrushed. This is real life. I've been here over 10 years, and I've been working in human-centered design in healthcare for longer than that. I work a lot in UX design, service design, a lot of user research for health providers, health services, health technology in the Twin Cities. And beyond, but a lot of our clients are local. And that includes medical devices as part of health technologies. Sometimes we're working on software side, sometimes we're working with medical devices. I see lots of medical device players here in town, which is great. Maybe some of you work in med device too, or healthcare, which is awesome. And in the med device space, I've had the luck to work on cardiac, neurovascular, urology, pulmonology, diabetes, and hernia devices, which is just, I don't know, a fun variety. Always never a dull moment here at Fathom. Just a little tiny bit about Fathom. We're super excited to have you all here tonight. We love to do this at least once a year. We love UXPA. Lots and lots of us have been involved in UXPA over the years, including board seats, sponsorships, speaking, all kinds of things. We're super excited that you're here. We love opening our space to you. We do have a usability lab and we are renting that out now. If anyone needs a lab space, like feel free to reach out to me or anyone else on the Fathom team. Fathom is a business and design consultancy, and we take everything through a human-centered design lens. We talk a lot about human-centric decision-making, human-centric facilitation, and of course, human-centered design, which is what you all, I think, know and care about, as do I. And we've been in business for 25 years. We just celebrated our 25th anniversary last year. Yes, very excited. And we're always thinking about bringing all the voices to the table in any decision or device or design that's going to impact people. Like, what are all those voices we need to get at the table and we need to hear from? And that is going to tie right into inclusive design. Fathom works on all kinds of things. I mentioned I get to work a lot in the health tech space, healthcare software, digital. Of course, we love digital interfaces around here, medical devices, but also like health and wellness programs, other types of process design and service design, even helping people design partnerships, design strategic initiatives. We'll design like just about anything. I'm going to be honest with you, in a good way. And we'll try and do that in the most human-centric way we can think about. And we do a lot of double diamond thinking. It wouldn't be a UXPA event without the double diamond, you guys. So we like to think about design the right thing and then design the thing right. We do a lot in the discovery space and define space, and then of course ideating and iterating. We're going to talk a lot about iterating today. What's pointer? Oh, Brett, that's your pointer. Sorry, is that going to drive anybody else crazy? Okay. So we're going to talk about iteration tonight. You know what part of the double diamond that's at. But really, I want to talk about two things tonight: watches and noses. Who in the room wears a watch? Ooh, nice. Who in the room has a nose? Oh, just kidding. These are smart watches. We're going to talk about, I'm going to do a case study about smart watches. These are noses of all my pets. So we're actually going to talk about human noses, but these noses were a lot cuter than cropping out a bunch of human noses. It didn't work. But before I talk about that, a little background on safe, usable, and inclusive medical devices. Then we're going to get into case studies. I talk really fast. If you want to ask a question, like feel free to raise your hand, and I'll stop. Sorry, I'm laughing because sometimes I say it's like, you can try and stop me, but it is a little challenging. And you guys, if you see anything in the chat, you'll stop me. Is that the deal? Okay. You have a whole blue circle. That's amazing. Oh, okay. The hand signals and everything. So I talked a little bit about Fathom. We think a lot about human-centered design and human-centric everything. And a couple of years ago, we started thinking about what human-centered meant to us. And we decided, and I put it on a slide and Jeff helped me, it's not human-centered unless you have all three of these things. So the thing needs to be safe to use. It needs to be easy to use, and it needs to be inclusive of all users. So when we're thinking about medical devices, safe to use has to be top of mind, right? It has to be a top priority that no one's going to get hurt using this thing. And when we're thinking about medical devices, that could be the patient might get hurt, or the provider who's using the device or monitoring the device or implanting the device. So you have to think about safety of kind of everyone involved in that situation. We think about easy to use, of course, that's we're UXers, so we're all sold on that already. But thinking about the easier something is to use, the more effective and safe it is ultimately. So these definitely can be a really great partnership. And then inclusive of all users. So thinking about when everyone feels it's safe and easy to use, then it feels inclusive. So when we think about safe and easy and inclusive, we think about safe, do no harm, easy, efficient, I know how to use it, and inclusive, meaning everyone feels that way, not just some people. And these are all bicycle metaphors, if you're following along. So we've thought a lot at Fathom about human factors and user experience. We have folks who specialize in both. Elizabeth thinks a lot about human factors. Jeff and I think a lot about UX, as does Lucy. Where's Lucy? Over there. And Taylor. Lots of UXers here, lots of human factors folks here. And we think about these really as a really nice intersection. So thinking about human factors, they're focusing on safety. They're doing a lot of analysis, really trying to be exhaustive and robust and methodical about making sure the safety is there. And we've thought about all the things that could go wrong. We've mitigated them. We put on our UX hat and think about usability. We think about empathy and what people need and how they're going to use it in the real world and all these good leading with empathy things. And then the intersection, right? We're both thinking about users. We're both thinking about goals. We're both thinking about the environments where this thing is going to get used, what people are going to try and do with it. And we both conduct a lot of user research, and we both use a lot of iteration to get to the final design. So those are things we have in common. Anybody like Venn diagrams? Okay, good. When we think about inclusive, now I just did a join. Or not a join, what's the all-inclusive one? Circle. I did a circle. Union. No, that's also join. I don't know. I was bragging to someone about logic class. This is where that has clearly faded from my memory. When we think about both those fields to me sit inside, in a perfect world, inside inclusive design, which is making sure it's a good match for everybody. And inclusive design, whereas HF, human factors, is focusing on safety, usability is focusing on ease of use. I'm simplifying, right? They focus on a lot of things. Inclusive design focuses on fit or match. So does it feel like a good fit? Does it feel like it's for me? Do I feel like I belong when I use it? Do I feel like this was designed for me, or was it kind of designed for someone else and I'm just was an afterthought? And it's grounded particularly in the experience of excluded folks. So where we said HF is maybe a little more grounded in analysis, UX leans a little more into empathy. Inclusivity looks specifically at people who are often on the margins of design or not thought of in design, and make sure we ground ourselves in their experiences. So this is a definition from Kat Holmes, who wrote a book called Mismatch. Fantastic if you have not read it. Inclusive design is a method of design. So this is a method we use while we're designing. It's not something we do at the end. And it's not an outcome, it's a method. So it's not, oh, this is an inclusive design thing. It's like I'm using inclusive design. It's a verb. It's a method. It's looking again to the expertise of folks often excluded from our design processes in our world. And at the end of the day, when you're using this method, your goal is that each user feels the product fits them. It belongs, they belong to it, it belongs to them. It feels like a good match, feels like a good fit. Obviously different than it feels safe. Although if something doesn't feel safe, it probably also doesn't feel like a good fit. So that's where you get back into Venn diagrams. But we're past that slide and we're not going backwards. So I like to make the distinction, as does Kat Holmes in her book Mismatch. Inclusive design, again, is a method of design. Accessibility is also a method, but really it's an attribute of a finished product. It sort of is accessible or it's not. It meets certain standards, often ADA standards. I'm looking for Matthias because he cares about this a lot, or it doesn't. And it makes sure that users can use the product, right? They're able to, it's accessible to them. And universal design also is in this intersection of design methods. Universal design also is more a characteristic of a finished product. It can be a mindset of design, but it's maybe less a method of design. And it looks to make the products work without adaptation. So universal design means you shouldn't have to use an assist to use this device. You shouldn't have to do anything different than anyone else. It universally works for everyone. And it means most users can use the product. So whereas accessibility kind of has that like any user or all users, universal design is sort of more like most users. And again, these are focused on like, can they? It's access. It's like versus inclusive design, which is more about fit and feel and how you feel when you interact with something. And again, if you're interested in this topic, Mismatch by Kat Holmes is my favorite source by far. And I think she just explains it really, really well. And not necessarily from UX lens. She goes into architecture, services, playgrounds, like all kinds of great examples of inclusive design. Here's our first interactive element. Did I tell you there were interactive elements? I saved that as a surprise. I would like us together, and we can have our friends online help us too if you guys want to shout out some of their responses. Let's improve trail mix using our safe, easy, and inclusive framework here. So this is trail mix. It's our friend. Let's say we were going to eat some, or let's say we were going to serve some. Anyone have ideas? How can we make trail mix safer? Let's start with that one. Take the peanuts out. Some people have allergies. Yeah. Ooh. Yes, you could separate it out. Yes. Good. Any other ideas to make it safer? Yes. Yes, we could label it properly so you know what's actually in it. What if you had small children with small windpipes, choking hazards? Is that what you're going to say? Yeah. It's not safe. It's just not. Put it away. Yes. What were you going to say? Really big. Jumbo. Let's have like prunes in it instead of raisins. Yeah. Yes. I remember having little kids. I told you to cut the grapes. Grapes are like the biggest choking hazard, right? Grapes and hot dogs. That's what all my kids wanted to eat. How can we make trail mix easier? Any ideas? Make it easier to eat, easier to transport, easier to sell? Little, yes, little pouches on the go. I like that. Yeah. Yes. Yes, you tear it open and it's everywhere. Just have it like resealable. Yes. General Mills. Yes. Oh, a trail mix bar. I like that. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Stacy, we got some great minds thinking alike here. Okay. Anything else make it easier to use? Chocolate that doesn't melt. Yes. Okay, how can we make it more inclusive? Someone brought up peanuts. That's kind of a not very inclusive additive. Maybe have no nuts in it all. It's all chocolate. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Or even like, what's your perfect ratio, right? Of like, I like a little more salty, you like it a little more sweet. Yeah. Yeah. What do you want in your trail mix when you get there? So it's already there waiting for you. Like the rider, was it Def Leppard, only green M&Ms or no green M&Ms? Yes. Yeah. That's a great one. All these colorblind people feel so left out. Theirs isn't colorful, maybe.
Different snack culture.
Yeah.
Like coconut shrimp flake.
Ooh.
I don't know, dried bananas or something.
Yeah, dried plantains or something. Yeah, that's a good idea. Make it a little more inclusive of different cultures. Yeah.
Packaging that could be operated with one hand.
There you go. Have you ever tried to open trail mix with one hand? Not easy. The Ziploc baggie would help.
Someone said gluten-free, dairy-free.
Gluten-free, dairy-free, vegan trail. Delicious. Yeah. Plantains would work. Okay, good. So you're getting an idea. We're going to talk about these three things a lot. So, okay. Watch out. Here comes a case study. I promised you a case study. I didn't promise you puns, but there are puns. So here's my first case study. So our client, this was several years ago, so people are maybe not quite as smartwatch crazed as they are today. Our client had adapted an off-the-shelf smartwatch to make a safety device for seniors. They meant like senior citizens, not like seniors in high school. And so using this adapted smartwatch, they could take their pulse, they could track their steps, and they could call emergency services if they like fell. So this was their version of, I'm going to date myself, I've fallen and I can't get up. Not a very inclusive commercial, but it did stick with us. So we all on the team tried it. Their developers had tried it. The product owners had tried it. Everyone at Fathom tried it. Super easy to use. There were 3 screens. Take my pulse, track my steps, call EMS. What could be easier? But we weren't the user. So we went out and recruited some older folks to test out this watch. This is my dad's arm. So I have permission to use that picture as much as I want. He uses my picture. Okay, so what do you guess we might have learned about what made this device inclusive or exclusive? Who do you think this device might include? Who might feel included? Yeah, go ahead. People who can see. Yes. Yes, people with good fine motor dexterity. Yes. Anyone else who might include? Anyone who might exclude? Yeah, go ahead. Tech savvy to begin with. Read small things. Yes, people with no memory issues. People who can afford it. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Anyone else you think might be included? Anyone who might be excluded? I think all those were good examples of exclude too, but anyone come to mind specifically when we think about who might be excluded? People who are blind might be excluded. Yep. Yes. Where are you going to wear a watch if you don't have wrists and arms? Yep. Yeah. Very hairy arms. I think you're right. Or wear sweatshirts, you know? People with circulation issues. Yeah. Yeah, all you watch wearers, I was like, oh, you must not have the same eczema I have. I put on those metal watches, I'm a mess in a week. Yeah. Yep. Darker skin tattoos might not sense as well. Yep. Yes, people with a cast on. Good. These are all great examples. Okay. So what we learned, so we did 2 rounds of testing, people over 70. We learned, was it safe to use? Well, many of them couldn't navigate to the call screen, which was the whole point of the thing, was to call EMS. So that made it a little less safe. One of the interesting parts about safety is like, there's harms that are like, oh, something bad happened to you. And then there's harms that are like, oh, the device didn't work. So you got harmed in the exact way the device was trying to prevent you from being harmed. So this kind of fell in that category. I'm really like simplifying this. So if any of you are experts, know that it's intentional. I know your work is much more complex than that. Also, a long press on this watch caused a reboot. And long pressing was really common because older adults who didn't grow up with touchscreens, when it doesn't work right away, tended to long press. At the end of the day, we've learned that long press actually didn't need to do anything. So we just programmed it so long press did the same thing as short press. It worked a lot better the second time around. Was it easy to use? Callie, you mentioned tremors. So on this device, a tremor actually read as a swipe. So if anyone had a tremor, it would navigate them to the next screen, which was not what they were trying to do. Very frustrating. Again, resulting in a lot of long presses as the solution, which then put them in a reboot mode, which was totally confusing. The text was too small. Someone mentioned that. Way too small. Way too small. And there were 2 boot screens because there was like this, I think it was a Samsung watch. There's a Samsung screen followed by this app that then like took over the watch. That was super confusing. There were also 2 user guides in the box. That was super confusing. So in terms of easy to use, like even just like turning the thing on and knowing which guide to look at, people were already stuck. And then inclusive. So some of the really interesting things that we found out was that a lot of people who want to wear a watch are already wearing one and they like the watch they have. My dad wears a Velcro watch. And he likes it a lot, and he replaces that watch band a lot, and he can replace the battery at Walmart. He doesn't have to plug it in at night. So it wasn't for everyone, right? And then some people don't like to wear watches, and they weren't going to start wearing a watch because they had all the reasons, sensory issues and eczema and all the reasons people don't wear watches. The watch was much too large and heavy for some of our participants. We had some rather frail people. We had some like older, quite thin people. The watch was kind of like clunking around on the desk, or they'd like try and turn their wrist and the watch would kind of like stick over here. So it just really was not like one size fits all at all. And one of the most interesting pieces we learned was that the family's role in an emergency is not universal. And this was almost 50-50. We had participants who said, I don't want to call emergency services. I just want to call my adult daughter. I want to call my neighbor. I don't want the ambulance to come just because I fell down. I just want my neighbor to come, like, help me back up. And the other 50% who said, I would never want to call my family because I don't want them to know I fell. They already want to move me into a home. So I want the anonymity of calling EMS. So when we think about inclusive design, we needed to understand that different people were going to have different preferences for where they wanted that call to go. This was not going to be a one size fits all design solution. So either they needed to make a choice and make it really clear, this is who this watch is for, or they needed to allow some user choice, at least at the setup of where a call was going to go in an emergency. And we found all that in just 2 rounds of testing. Again, you guys are probably already on board with the iteration, but let's circle back, shall we? So when we think about our typical like discovery and design and user testing and safety, so we use ease of use and safe to use and our validation rounds. We think about this in terms of user testing. I think about the UX lens, right? Finding those friction points, finding those frustrations, looking for user adaptations. What are they trying to do to fix the problem themselves? All these things that we can learn from when we're doing user testing. At the same time, we can think about what are all the safety things we're learning during our user testing. We might pick up on new harms that we hadn't thought of, like going through our super analytical, all things that could go wrong. Then you put it in someone's hands and you're like, oh, didn't know they would try and stick it up their nose. Okay, let's note that one, right? Like, good to know. And you might see like the real impact of errors. So maybe you had like hypothetically in your mind what might happen if someone made an error, and then you see it during some user testing, you see what actually happens. And often what I find is that we've predicted a lot of the errors, right? But we maybe hadn't predicted how they might stack on top of each other. So even in the watch example, right? Like they're already confused that there's 2 user guides. They're kind of off on the wrong track. They're in the wrong boot screen. And so, and they can't call the thing, and they're doing a long press, and that's causing a reboot. Now we're back to the 2 boot screen issue. So it's not that we didn't have each of those things kind of in our analysis as a thing that could happen. But man, watching them really like just kind of pile on top of each other, like drives that home in a new way and can help you really think about the design. Like, where could we kind of stop this train from derailing so that we're not in this long sequence of failures? And typically we find that you can find most of those friction points and frustrations and most of those harms in about 3 cycles through this iteration. So even if that's just 6 or 8 users, you can find a lot of stuff, but we really like to do it iteratively because you find different ones each time, or you find a bunch of issues, you design a bunch of new stuff and you fix some of them, but then you make other things worse, or your fix didn't quite fix it the way you thought it would because now they're doing something else. So it's this kind of this circle of going through that a couple times. When you think about doing that in an inclusive way, on the user testing side, we think about who are we going to include, right? That's the first and foremost thing, is let's make sure we have a wide variety of people. There are a lot of methods to get to that. I'm not going to like talk about them in depth here today, but keeping in mind that the more variety of people you have in your testing, the more of these inclusion bits you're going to find. If we hadn't had people who were quite frail and thin in our testing session, we wouldn't have we would have missed that the watch was not going to be a good fit. If we hadn't had people in our testing session who didn't have the kind of family relationships where they could call them an emergency, we might have thought that was going to be a universally applicable solution. So it's making sure you have that variety. Oversampling excluded populations. So maybe this device hasn't been tested with people of a certain education level, people of a certain racial ethnic background, people of a certain gender. You need to get more of those people now, because you've probably missed them in previous rounds. And then like at least consider weighting the feedback from those groups. They know what they know from their own experience, and they know how much life has excluded them already, and they can bring that to you. But if you say, well, 2 people out of 10 had that experience, so it's only 20%, and throw it out, instead of saying 2 people out of 10 had that experience, those were the only 2 people we had who represented colorblind people or people over the age of 70. So we're going to weight that more heavily, right? Because it's important to us to design for those populations. Then on the safety side, thinking about, someone mentioned, opening trail mix with 1 hand, right? So what's the impact of ability on your harms evaluation? If you've sat and brainstormed your harms, and you might see some of them happen with people with certain abilities, you might see different ones happen with people with other abilities. And then thinking about the harms to people of different sizes, genders, backgrounds, etc., might be different. So a harm might not happen to someone who's younger, male, certain, generic male size, that would happen to someone who's smaller or less able to read or something like that. So thinking about, again, weighting and understanding that just because it was 1 or 2 people out of your sample doesn't mean it's not important. If you're interested in this one, I would say do even lightweight research on crash test dummies, would show you the importance of having more than 1 size person in your testing. All right, hopefully all that's good. And we always get to go back to design and try it again. So that's the good news. Okay, here's a case study for nosy people. You guys kind of nosy? So last year, our client created a medical device. It needed to fit snugly against 1 nostril for a few seconds and then the other. I can't say more about it than that. Highly confidential, so stop being nosy. But I can tell you that I noticed a lot more about people's noses during this project than I ever had in my whole entire life. And for about 6 months, anytime anyone was talking to me, I was like, look at that nose. So this is my nose. And my nostrils kind of like go up, which I didn't even know, and out. This is my colleague Jeff's nose. And his are kind of like a little more flat down. This is my colleague Shauna's nose, and hers are like completely facing the ground. So if I was going to illustrate how to hold something snugly against your nose, am I illustrating it this way, this way, this way, this way? I mean, the possibilities are endless. And we're all actually of fairly similar racial and ethnic backgrounds. If you bring in folks from lots of other different backgrounds, the variety truly is endless of noses. So a device that has to go under your nose for a couple seconds. Who might this include or exclude? Yes? People with facial hair. We like our beards in Minnesota. In Texas, it's a handlebar mustache, right? Yeah. People with piercings. Absolutely, we saw that. Yes. Low bridge nose. Absolutely. Else? Deviated septum. Not everyone breathes out of both nostrils all the time. I didn't know that. Cleft palate. This one over here. Yes, people who are stuffed up and not breathing out of their nose at all. That was me for many years. I got shots. Okay, anyone else? Okay, good. Oh, right on time. All right, so 3 rounds of testing. We had users as young as 5, which was so adorable. I love user testing with kids. That's my new favorite thing. They're so enthusiastic. They're like, I'll do anything. To 75. Yeah, put this under my nose. Sure. I love putting things in my nose. So was it safe to use? Well, nobody hurt themselves. So that was good. We had them sign releases just in case, but nobody got hurt. So that was good. Some people wouldn't have gotten an accurate result. So again, this is one of those like harms by the product not doing what it's supposed to do versus like a direct harm to you, but still quite important. If you're developing a product to give someone a result and many of them wouldn't have gotten an accurate result, I think we can call that harm. Was it easy to use? Well, what we learned was that people's ideas about what to do with something that we say goes near the nose, let's put it up your nose. We've all been trained to put it up your nose all the way to your brain. Just keep going. Just keep going. And that wasn't how this thing's supposed to be used at all. And we had instructions right there on the table that said, put it under your nose. No, I gotta put it in my nose. Once they understood what to do, most people could do it easily, right? But this is where you get easy to use. It's not just your device. It's what's all the predicates. That was a fancy word. What's all the things that people already know? They already think they know. They're just going to dive in. I know how to do this. And some people needed a mirror. Like I said, I didn't think about my nostrils. Well, no one else actually knew where their nostrils were either. They're going like, is that how I know? They're asking me. I'm the tester. I can't tell you. So for our 3rd round, we actually had a mirror on the table and people could like look at it. They didn't like looking in our big usability lab mirror. They're like, I know there's people back there. So that was interesting. So then we decided, well, maybe we should put an illustration in our instructions that show you looking in a mirror. Encourage people to go look in a mirror while you do this. And was it inclusive? Well, we already talked about nostrils, lots of different shapes and sizes and alignments and directions. Some people only use one nostril. That was really interesting. We told them to use it on one side and then the other, and they're like, nothing's happening with this one. So do they still do it? Do they not have to do it? Are they going to get a result? Well, no. And this fit to your nose might be impacted. Someone said piercings, jewelry. We had people, all kinds of jewelry in the lab trying to fit this thing close to their nose, especially the septum one was hard. If it was up here, it wasn't too bad, but if it was down here, it was hard to get it tight. And long fingernails. We had lots of people in the lab. I don't know if you have these or, you know, have people in your life with the very long fingernails trying to like open a thing, like put it and their thumbnails like in their eyeball. And I'm like, oh no, someone is going to get hurt. They knew what they were doing. I was nervous for them. So just thinking about, do I feel like I belong? If someone's designed this thing for me and I'm supposed to put it on my nostril, but it's this big and my nostril is this big, or vice versa, it's huge and my nostril is small. If I have a piercing that doesn't allow it to get near my nose, if I have fingernails and I'm trying to handle it, but it's hard to do, these things don't make me feel very inclusive to me. It feels like this was designed for somebody else. You guys got a lot of those. Good job. All right. Now I'm wrapping up. We're coming to the end here. So yes, just in summary, not human-centered in my mind, in our mind, unless you have all three. It's got to be safe to use. Yes, let's not hurt anyone. And that includes, it does what it says it's going to do. It's easy to use, it's effective, and then it's inclusive. We want people to feel like they belong, like it was made for them, like it's a good match for how they're trying to use it. And that's all I have. Questions, thoughts, experiences to share? We have plenty of time. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the question was about pain points we could take care of and the ones we had to just kind of compromise. It's a really good question. I think there were some that we could, like a lot of the tremors and the long presses were actually super easy fixes. They just kind of made all actions do the same thing. So that was pretty easy. Some of the tremor stuff, I guess there were settings too, where like you could make it, the swipe needed to be like really a swipe, like less sensitive kind of a thing. I think the compromise was always going to be that this was always going to be on a commercial watch. And so trying to get this actually became a performance thing of like the faster we could get our boot screen to go, the less likely they were to interact with the original one, the like sort of the watch built-in boot screen. But I think there were always going to be two. And so then it just became, trying to make the user guide be really clear. Like if you're in this screen, you're in the wrong spot. Or somehow kind of, I don't know, they'd kind of done a thing where like they hacked the original watch where this was the only app on it. So if you were in that, then there was only one thing to do and that launched the real one. So there were some workarounds. In terms of compromises, like the physical form factor, like things that it didn't fit people who were frail or thin. And that was the off the shelf watch that they'd chosen to partner with. So I think that was gonna have to be a longer term strategic decision. Like who has a better watch design in the market that fits more of our population? Or one of the things I always thought about, which I don't know if they did, but was like, is the pulse stuff that important? Like, because that's really where you need it to fit snugly. If you just wanted people to be able to call EMS, you could have a light, you could have it around your neck, you could have it around your waist, you could do all kinds of different things with it. But if you wanted the pulse and the steps, it had to be like on the arm. Yeah, good question. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'd love to hear for either case study how the business stakeholders responded and like took the feedback and what they maybe implemented or not.
Yeah, good question. And we're not always there for that part, but I would say overall they were receptive to the feedback. There is a part in every project I think where realistically you have to say, as we just did, like here's things we can fix, here's things that are going to have to be addressed later. I think in particular on the nose one, a lot of the things, it wasn't really that hard actually to adapt it to be more to feel like a better fit. It had a, like change the shape a little bit. And a lot of it was on the instructions, like how do we show it? And what we actually ended up doing was instructions that were a little more, I don't want to say stick figure-y, but a little less realistic, because then you're not showing as much exactly how to do it. They also made a video. They thought that might help, like more than paper instructions, although you can't ensure anyone's going to watch that video. And ultimately I just saw that they have changed the form factor dramatically to make it more clear that it's that it doesn't go in your nose. Because there's ways to do that, right? Like you can label all over it, don't put it in your nose, but if you make it look kind of small and stick-like versus almost anything else. Yeah. Good question. Was there one online? No.
They're just saying if they can't hear the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll repeat it. Okay, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
How do you recruit participants for the tests when you're looking for such a diverse?
Yes, good question. So the question is how to find this big diverse group of people that we want for our testing sessions. There's a couple things, and we're still working on this. So actually, if other folks have experiences here, like super happy to share. One of the things we're looking at is trying to identify what are some of those things that, you know, if you over-index for education or socioeconomic status, sometimes you sort of automatically get a lot of other types of variety. If you lead with a race-first approach, then you at least know that you have racial diversity, and often you get a lot of other types of diversity that comes along with that. So I think where we're landing, and again, this is a process for us, is it's not necessarily about having 14 quotas. It's finding the ones that really matter for this device, that are most likely to be impacted by it, that are most likely underrepresented. And then if you can, finding like characteristics that might also net you a bunch of other types of variety. We didn't ask about piercings in our screener, but by making sure we had people between 18 and or 16 and 25, it happened pretty naturally. We didn't ask about literacy levels, but we asked about education levels, and we ended up getting a nice variety in that way. Trying to think of some other things. I don't know, Brett, you were working on the screener with me that we asked about. Does anyone else have experiences on inclusive recruiting? Because we're working on it, but we don't have all the answers here yet. I don't know if other folks have anything they want to share on that topic. We're open to it. Yes, that's right. Yes, learning disabilities, sight and hearing, physical disabilities, including like only able to use one hand, and anxiety, especially in particular, like anxiety around like medical stuff. Because one of our hypotheses, and ADHD or anxiety or focus issues, I think was how we phrased it. Because one of our thoughts was like, if this is 12 steps, like that might be a lot. So one of the things we did was try and overrepresent those populations, especially in our first round or two, because then you start to really understand what the challenges are going to be. You're not like surprised by them later when you're trying to have good success. Yeah. What do you think? Oh. Okay. Yes. So the thought for those online is co-creating the screener with different populations so you know what they find important. And I would guess also how they want to be asked about it and how they want to represent themselves. Yeah. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I love that. Yeah. Test the screener itself. Yeah. Mhm. Is it overwhelming? Is it clear? Do I feel respected by it? Can I see myself in it? Is the screener inclusive, right? Yes, yes, absolutely. Other thoughts on that topic? Yeah.
Do you find anything with including care provider as part of the design?
Yeah, the question is including the care provider as part of the design. I think not. Well, on the nose testing, we did have care. Well, we had a couple of different things. We had nurses come in and test patients, some of whom worked at Fathom, and some who were relatives of Elizabeth Sipple, mostly, who signed up as patients. And then we had parents test their kids or help their kids test themselves. And then I think we did have one or two adult caregivers with elderly patients. It is a really unique perspective. And I love the question because we often assume with our medical devices that the patient or the person receiving the device is doing everything. And that's often not true, either because of whatever they have going on that they are getting a medical device, or because of other things they already had going on. Lots and lots of people don't just have one thing going on, right? Very few people have like just a heart issue. There's lots and lots of other things going on. So understanding their full situation, and then yes, who is helping them with their care, either on the daily basis, on the weekly basis. We had an interesting one on a medication dispenser that was designed where like the caregiver could come over once a week and like load in all the things, and then it would kind of periodically throughout the day do the thing it needed to do. And that was one where it's really important to get the caregiver's perspective, because like if they're not coming over once a week doing it, then it all falls apart. Yeah. And if they're not trusting it, or they're, you know, all the reasons the caregivers might decide it's not inclusive of the relationship they're trying to have with their parent, or whoever in their life, but usually the parent. Yeah. Great question. Yeah.
You ever incentivize your participants, and if so, what kind of
Yes.
inclusivity has to be thought of about that?
That's a really great question. We do incentivize our participants usually by gift cards or checks. It's a great question. I mean, I think in particular, like, you know, folks who don't have bank accounts are unable to open bank accounts, right? I hand you a check. What am I going to do with that? Thinking about like what's a meaningful denomination for someone's time, which differs, and thinking about anything that it might bring into the testing arena, whether that's performative or like I'm feeling like I need to show up and act in a certain way, or you're seeing me in a certain light as someone who, you know, has something that I can hold back. We do put in all of our research agreements that they can leave and they'll still receive the incentive. Don't want too many people take me up on it, but I always get nervous when I'm saying it. They're going to be like, sweet. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
We're like working with my populations of kids, and we're like, do you have this issue? And all like 5 people said yes, and then when we talked to them, they didn't. They just wanted
Yes.
a card. And so
Yeah.
I guess we should have written the screener.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not sure if you're getting all that online, but the screener was written in a way that said, do you have this issue? People said yes to get the incentive, but then when they showed up, they didn't actually. Yes. Yes, that has happened to me. Sometimes it helps to put a bunch of things in there, so they're maybe not sure which one you're looking for. Or sometimes we'll put in some like, I don't want to say complex, but some follow-up questions and like look at the quality of their responses to see, I think they don't actually, but you still get some. And that's, I mean, so we just over recruit for that. And our clients are like, that was a bad participant. I'm like, it was, and that's why we're testing 12 when we only need 10, because it's just going to happen. But you're right, incentives do also incentivize fudging. Yeah.
While you're testing it,
Oh, that's a good question. The question is around when you're testing an environment of standards, are there any false positives or false negatives that might be happening? I'm thinking about, I don't know if this is the right, I don't know if this is an answer to your question. I'm thinking about the incentives of finishing a study and showing that things are good is hard, right? This is where like our ethics as researchers and humans like have to really lead and not be tempted to be like, oh, it was pretty good, they probably passed, or yeah, they got distracted, but it was environmental. And I don't know. Yeah, have you had experience with that? I'm wondering if your question like comes from an experience.
there has often been times when situation
Mm-hmm.
well, you use a screen reader and you're playing a memory. This screen reader goes back and
Oh,
so in some instances, so it's a game of fun.
right.
That's an interesting conversation.
Yeah. That's Minnesota interesting conversation. Well, that was an interesting conversation with a lawyer. I have never thought about that. You've opened my mind. It's going a lot of places now. That's super interesting. I don't know if I can do it justice. Yeah, so thinking about a memory game, testing people on a memory game, but folks with screen readers had a history that they could go back to. and they were forced to cheat, really. It was only right, it's really the only way they could play it. And then there was an interesting conversation with a lawyer. And I think that's the part that I will take. That's super interesting. Yes.
You mentioned about doing user testing with kids and children.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned how their parents help.
Yes.
So I just wanted to know, like, when you are recruiting or testing with children, how do you make that process work and what are some considerations to it?
Great question. Yes, we're talking about recruiting and testing with children. So there are special considerations. So one of the things I learned in an interesting conversation with a lawyer, luckily prospective, was that you really, I think, should always have a IRB, an institutional review board, look at anything with children. Lots of sensitivity around what might happen, what they might see or learn or do. So we did do that. And there's special consent that children give. It's assent instead of consent. And then their guardian or parent gives the consent and the children give the assent, which is interesting legal speak. But I think, yeah, I mean, I think it was really the biggest consideration for me in thinking about being inclusive was helping them feel comfortable and trying to get to know them enough in the first 3 or 4 minutes to like start to gauge how much they wanted to know, how, like, what level, of information to share with them. One of the things we did, which was Brett's idea, I think, and was super fun, was we actually showed them the viewer side of the lab so they could understand, like, there's people over here watching you, and look, it looks like a mirror, but it's actually not. And we let them sit on that side and watch their parents, and just like kind of get them comfortable with this experience. And then on the like science and direction side, we mainly left that to their parents because we wanted to see like how it would go at home. And one of the really interesting things we learned was that, some parents were really just like, yeah, okay, you read the directions and you do it at age 10 or 11 or 12, and others are, more like still being involved with their kid at 16, 17. So, your helicopter parent persona, they're like watching and looking, and then you have other parents that are like, I don't know, give it a try. So thinking about that, and you were talking about caregivers and parents, like they all have their different like personalities and tolerances too. The only other thing I'd say with kids is like maybe don't let them too near the candy. So the end of the test, then you let them at the candy table. We left them in the room with the candy table first, and it's good. It's good to like build rapport, but it's not good for like sit down and do the test. Yeah, go ahead.
On that topic, how do you get adult participants comfortable with being in a test setting like that?
Yes, good question. How to get adult participants comfortable? That's a good question. I feel like some of them almost never are. They're just like so aware someone's watching them. I just try and like be casual. I don't usually dress up much. I think that helps. I think early in my career, we got the memo like, hey, the client wants you to like wear the suit. And I think that works okay with like physicians. We do a lot of medical device work with physicians, and you don't want to show up too sloppy for them. But when we have parents and kids, and I mean, I might dress like this, like pretty sloppy. I didn't dress up for you guys. So I didn't want you to be uncomfortable. I think that helps. Honestly, I do. And then I think just like being like low stakes, like letting them read everything in their own time, not rushing them through the consent and like running behind, that helps. And then, I mean, we tell them the people are back there, and they know. Some will wave and some will just be like, okay, I know about that. I actually feel like the cameras are the bigger. I feel like they can almost forget the mirror quicker than the cameras. So one of the things we've been pushing is like, how much camera feed do we really need? Like, do we need their hands and their face and the table and the corner and like, who's watching who's going back and watching all these hours of camera feeds, right? So like, let's just weigh every camera we're putting in the room against like what we're really going to do with that data. Yes, we need some evidence they were here. Yes, we might miss something in our recording, but the amount of times I've really wanted to go back and watch a recording, pretty minimal. So I don't know. Do other folks have tips on that? Like making people comfortable? I probably make people uncomfortable. Probably doing that right now. Yeah. Yes. I love that. My colleague Amy was working on a diabetes device and she shared with every patient, my grandmother has diabetes, and this research is really important to me. And you're right, they warmed up a lot. And I think they felt less, especially in the healthcare world, right? It's like, oh my God, I had to talk to people with, and my colleagues and I had to talk to people with stress urinary incontinence. It's like, okay, hey, what's your name? Oh, okay, you're in Boston. Oh, what's the weather like there? So how many pads a day do you use? Like you need a warm-up question. Like, what? I mean, yeah, that's great. Yeah, what were you gonna add?
I think it also caused a little bit of social acceptance bias.
Oh,
The participants.
yeah.
Have you noticed any? If so,
Yeah. No, tell me more.
there's a saying goes, in labs,
Yeah.
lab,
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So, good old days of having
Yes.
testing labs. With their various days,
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's a good question. So we're talking about the behavior in the lab might not be the behavior in real life at home. And you call it social acceptability bias. So is that like kind of like performing what I think you want to see, or?
For instance, like it could be way more feedback.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, they might be eager. They might be more positive feedback. Yep. 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 You look like that was resonating with you too. Oh, sorry. I thought you were like not agreeing. Yes. Thumbs up on that one. Yeah. Yeah.
Previous role that I was in, we were designing this app for folks who had like a stroke.
Yeah.
And to your point about the social acceptability bias, like we did notice that, like we did testing with like the nurses, all this stuff, and patients. But then once we actually went into the hospital where they were doing actual rehab, we noticed there was a ton of differences in the actual.
Yeah.
And so like one of the things that I thought was interesting that was like there are certain goals that they're trying to accomplish in their real life, right?
Yeah.
Like for example,
Yeah.
I talked with a patient, they're like, I literally just want to learn how to walk to the car so I can go fishing with my kids.
Yeah.
Right, my grandkids. Like that was one of their goals. So then, you have to understand like the barriers that they might face in their actual environment to accomplish those things.
Yes. Yes.
So, like,
yeah. So the example was testing a device to help stroke patients rehab faster. And in the lab, they were like using it. This is great. But then in real life, they're like busy. They have different goals. They're just kind of trucking along with their day. They're not using it the same way you saw. That resonates with me a lot. Yeah. The one thing I've tried to do sometimes if I see someone struggling and they're going back like the fourth or fifth time to try something else, I don't know if this is the right or wrong thing to do, but sometimes I'll just ask them, I'll be like, if this was like a real work day, would you be attempting this again? And they'll be like, no. It's like, okay, that's what I needed to know. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Field studies in the patient's home. Yes. And I do think I think you get a little bit more authentic. Like you'll see like where they're actually going to be. Eddie does a ton of this in people's homes, but you still get that. Like, I'm going to keep trying. I want to please you. You're here and I'm going to use it the best way versus what they do in real life. But you at least see if they really couldn't in their home, like I don't know, we had a device folks were supposed to lay on their bed. Well, some of them didn't sleep in a bed. They slept in a recliner. Oh, yeah, your mom. Yeah, my mother-in-law sleeps in a recliner, slept in a recliner. Yeah, what were you gonna add, Marat? Yeah.
Very costly, time consuming.
Yes.
Very hard to navigate. Marketing research, they have a very interesting approach. I tried it once slightly, which is called invest in a future. So
Okay.
people are asking, hey, okay.
Oh, sure.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, how about you're an investor?
Yes.
Funds. How
Yes.
much did you invest in it? When money is part of the conversation,
Yeah.
the actions change drastically.
That's great. Okay, so this is invest in a feature. So yes, and you get better, like rather than saying, yes, I'd use this, they're saying, yes, I would put my money on the line for this. Or I've seen it like, okay, you have $50, this feature's 20, this feature's 10. Like how would you, and there's 10 features, like how would you allocate your funds? Now you're making them make choices. I do think that makes a lot of sense to me that you would get better results that way. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. That's all right.
Because obviously we're talking a lot about doing this testing. That's all great. But a lot of times what happens in the real world is you have to convince people that this is worth spending the time, money, and effort on.
Yeah.
And if they're actually going to learn something.
Yeah.
Right. And so I want to go back to your presentation. Because
Yeah.
you mentioned over sampling for the communities that are on the education.
Mm-hmm.
They're marginalized.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but a lot of times they're marginalized for a good reason. And sadly, it's because, like they might not be the target audience. So look at that watch, right?
Yeah.
Watch.
Yep.
That watch is $500. There's going to be a whole set of people who just can't.
Already excluded. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
They're not part of that.
Yep.
How do you convince your stakeholders?
Yeah.
To be like, hey, you need to go test this with this audience.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm going to try and summarize it. So the question is around, we're talking about being inclusive of all different kinds of people, and in particular people on the margins, but yet our clients have a target market, right? And sometimes we tell them to, like, who's your persona? Who is this actually for? So it's a very tricky balance. And I don't claim to have all the answers. A couple things I think about. One is, if this is your target market or this is your main user persona, how do you at least make sure it's inclusive within that? So if it's a $500 watch, you don't have to assume that everyone who has money is the same size. You don't have to assume that everyone has the same money, or everyone who has money is literate, like has the same vision problems, right? So you've made some decisions about entering an elite market, but you still need to be inclusive within that. The other thing I think about is, are there things that are exclusionary because you just never thought about them? So I had a student, I teach at Metro State. I had a student who was working on an app for, it was like play dates. There was something about play dates and like finding, I don't want to say it was like Bumble for kids, but it was like finding good matches, like who's my kid gonna like, and then setting them up, right? I think they were people you knew, but it was like setting up little play dates. And they had just kind of like unintentionally assumed it was moms setting up the play dates. And so that was not an instance of like, I'm making an app for moms. It was like, I'm making an app for play dates, and oops, I actually just excluded the fact that dads could set up play dates, right? So I think it's more that it's like, at the same time, I really hate to hear people just saying like, well, we don't have any. And we hear this about clinicians in particular, right? Like, well, there aren't any female urologists. That is actually largely true. It's changing, but I think literally urologists, many of them are over 60, and like literally 96% are male. I still think you can learn something from those female urologists that are out there. They have a unique perspective. And by listening to them, you may also find out things that your male urologists are not telling you, or not showing you. So I don't know. My answer is just really hard. But at the very least, for who you've said it's for, can you be inclusive within that? And then if you're being kind of like unethical or like gross about who it's for and not for, then I don't really want to work on it. But I know that people do. Wasn't a very good answer. Do others have thoughts on this? Yeah. Oh, you, okay. Yeah, did it real quick then. Yeah. What would you add, Tom?
Like, if you're trying to balance mixed methods, maybe
Yeah.
it's part of the validation cycle.
Sure. There you go.
But given this scenario, you have a $500 watch, and you're saying like, well, what about the people who, for some set of circumstances, could be included in this? They're a blind spot in the data.
Right.
Like, we actually can't
Don't know.
quantitatively suggest one way or the other. Like,
right.
how do we be inclusive? Where do we get those like blind spot data sources?
Yes.
Or is it synthetic data? Or like,
yeah. Or are there like other signals we could read, or like correlations that we could say, well, a lot of the folks who can't afford this or a lot of folks who could afford this fit this demographic? I mean, the other question you could ask is like, how do we make sure this watch is available to everyone? What kind of programs? Who can we partner with? How do we get insurance to pay for it? How do we get on Medicaid and Medicare? Like, I would rather answer those questions, but we don't always get to pick. But I think you're right. Are there things we could at least pick up that would make us start to ask better questions or know who we want to hear from in a quantitative data field? Are you trying to, yeah. I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. Oh my gosh, I didn't see what time it is. I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, so I thought it was really interesting with both your case studies about the instructions and user guides, which I feel like is a huge pain point of what is included with different devices.
Yes.
I think with thinking about the different studies and like if you're doing that, of how much extra time you might actually spend reading the instructions. How do you find a balance, I guess, when working with these companies on these devices that they have designed and that might require extensive instructions that might not be well written, that might be,
let's just say it, they're not well written. Let's just say it. Not universally, but sometimes. It's a great question. So to me, I think about like, the question I'm gonna summarize is about thinking about instructions, which are often not well written and often not accessed or used or read very thoroughly, versus like working on the device design. Yes. So yes. So to me, the instructions are kind of last resort. I mean, you have to do them, but if that's all you're relying on, I think it is a little risky. And sometimes that's the point of development that you're at, right? They didn't learn something they should have learned earlier. So now this is where we are. So to me, it's always like working within the constraints of the product life cycle you're in, right? We're all UXers. We all know what part of the product life cycle we're in. We're at the instructions part. So we're going to do everything we can, but still noting like, here's all your room for improvement. And I think in this case study, we were able to, see them realize like there's kind of only so much we can do with instructions. And they did actually go take another Revit design. So it can happen, but yeah, sometimes it's going to be instructions. Also just say inclusive design on instructions. I was installing some lights last night. Clearly assumed that there was a second person helping you install lights. Let's not assume there's someone just standing around helping you with all these things in your life. Sometimes you're alone installing lights. So yes, what's the online question?
Online is from Matt. We asked, from a happiness and career fulfillment standpoint, what is your favorite part about your current job, and what advice would you give to someone that might be?
Oh no, Kate's here. Kate, did you ask that question, Kate? Kate is Matt. Okay, Matt wants to know happiness and career perspective. What's my favorite part of my job? Is that really his question? Oh my gosh. Oh, my line of work. Okay, well, oh my gosh. Okay, literally my boss is watching me answer this. Kate's birthday poster is my favorite part of my job. No, actually, this is my favorite part of my job, truly, is like still 15 years in, like evangelizing, talking to new clients about like, hey, you have questions. Hey, we can answer those. Yes, it might be like an exhaustive field study that's super expensive. Or maybe it's a little like, let's get some Fathom friends and family in the lab and see what we can figure out. There's always something we can do to help you, like burn down your risk of making a bad decision or come up with a cool new design. They talk about it the same way. The methods are very similar. It's like, stop talking to each other, get in some kind of environment, whether it's a lab or a remote or in their house, talk to other people who want to use your device. And that's still my favorite part, is just watching all the kind of, I don't want to say wacky, but surprising things that people do. And then just helping clients like kind of get their ideas out there into the world, so where someone can experience them and tell them if they're right or wrong. Our clients are wrong a lot, and so that's kind of fun. But it's fun when they're right too, and it's fun like helping them understand the things they need to understand. Yeah, and then you encounter things in the real world and you're like, no one tested these instructions with one person. And it's, I don't know, that's fun too, because then you just get to be right all the time. That's my answer, Matt. Being right all the time. That's my favorite part. How did Kate feel about my answer? Okay, yes. I still have a job. Yes. Oh my gosh, I just love UX people. You're the best. Okay, good. Yes. No, here. No, here. You know, like, okay, yeah.
The answer was perfect and amazing. That's it. So thank you to everybody that joined us both online and in person.